Standing by. Oh, it is starting. Yep, and we are live. Okay, just a moment here. Now my freaking thing is doing this. Okay, so hello everybody and welcome to my channel. This is Brian of the Honey Badgers, and I am here with my very special guest, Arthur from the, oh, I'm sorry, it's called Revenge of the Dreamer is the YouTube channel. Thank you, Arthur, for coming on. How are you? How are you doing today, man?
Good, man. Thanks for having me tonight. I
All
appreciate
right.
you inviting me on.
No, it's cool. I wanted to let you know I came across your videos because you know, I let me tell you a little bit about myself. Before
All
I
right.
got involved with Honey Badger Radio, I had aspirations to be a professional illustrator. I wanted to go into animation. I wanted to go into all kinds of stuff, design, you know, maybe game design, whatever. I also had a special interest in doing comics, and I still work on them independently. I have one series that's on its third issue, and I'm looking at a couple of other projects I want to start. And I've been a big fan of comics for a long time. I'm an older guy. I was reading them from like the since like the 1980s, and you know I've always loved them.
Yeah.
However, I've noticed that in the last decade or so, maybe there's been a big push in those industries and other creative industries, such as film and television and gaming, etc., for this kind of identity politics, leftist social justice stuff. And it's actually extremely worrying for me because I think it's bringing the medium down in terms of its potential. So, as a result of that, I had done streams where I've tried to talk to other people that have the same concerns that I do. I'm always asking myself, you know, am I taking this stuff too seriously? Is this really that much of a problem? But every time I do, and I do criticize myself often, I find myself coming back to this, like, yeah, this is a problem. This is a big problem because I think it's really hurting, you know, the industry that I grew up with, the thing that I have a lot of love for. So
Right.
while watching other people who create content that talk about this stuff, basically YouTube sent me some of your stuff. So I was watching Micah Curtis, I watched Aiden Paladin, I watched Diversity in Comics, I watched some guy, a couple of other people. And I've reached out to and spoken to some of those. I've even spoken to people that work in the industry itself who also share my concerns, but they can't talk about it openly because their jobs are in danger. And I mean this literally. And this is not news. I mean, you guys know this now, that these people that work in the industry actually cannot come forward and they can't make their views heard. They can't, you know, talk about it because they're going to lose their jobs. So this is
Right.
how I came across your content. So I guess my question to you is, do you share these concerns yourself? And also, what made you want to make videos about this? Like, what was the thing that said, you know what, I got to talk about this stuff?
Sure. Yeah. You know, it's been pretty obvious for the past couple of years. There's been kind of an infiltration of, you know, like social justice, identity politics, exactly what you're talking about. Specifically with comics, video games, film. Some of my top viewed videos, and happen to do about film specifically. You know, I am a kind of like a film buff. You know, and you just started noticing these things where it's like, you know, people asking like, oh, we need, you know, diversity is the strength, and we need
Mm-hmm.
to, you know, like a movie can be great, and then you'll have these reviewers and people chastising the director or the creator of these movies, like, oh, why didn't you have like a more black people in the movie or people of color, or like, you know, it's kind of like a common complaint, like, oh, we need more LGBT representation in these movies. And that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of where I kind of started, like, hey, like there's kind of we're definitely like living in a culture war. And that's where I just wanted to make videos about it because you know, there's so many, the mainstream has a certain agenda that it seems like they're trying to push. And it's exactly what you're saying. Like, if people, you know, have that, you know, a different opinion,
Yeah.
they're not allowed to speak out. They're ostracized. Their jobs could be in jeopardy, if, you know, if it pertains to that. And I just wanted to speak to it and just give my opinion. And I think it is an important thing because these are all things that, if it comes to film, comics, all these things, it's things that we cherish, it's things that we enjoy, and there's all this infiltration that's happening, and it's just, I'm not the only one that's saying that we're sick of it, and that's kind of just my inspiration.
Yeah. I mean, I saw some of your videos, and I noticed that you have an interest in hip hop music as well, right? Yeah. Do you think that this stuff is creeping into hip hop music, this social justice sort of mentality,
I mean, when it comes to hip hop music, I think it's kind of like, because it is kind of predominantly with a black art form, black people, it's kind of avoided. It's kind of like, they try to talk about, to answer your question, no, I don't think so. I do notice sometimes, especially for like white rappers or white, if someone is from a different, if they're not black and they try to get involved in hip hop music, sometimes there is a backlash. Specifically when it comes to Post Malone, he gets like, everyone, in the hip hop community, black community, loves to call him a culture vulture because he raps and he has like braids and kind of has like this, he's influenced obviously by like hip hop, and people in a lot of black people hate that. Like they just absolutely hate it. There was also some rappers as well. I know like Nicki Minaj tweeted when she was looking at the top 10 iTunes rappers, it was like all white rappers. And then she was tweeting like, it must be a good time to be a white rapper, huh? And like just obviously displaying like a distaste. It tries to infiltrate. But I don't think it's much, but I think it's happening everywhere.
Right. No, absolutely. It sounds like with hip hop, there are people taking pokes at it, but it's not an easy sort of culture to simply throw blame at, because, to your point, is dominated by blacks, particularly black men. So the only way that you can sort of make that argument is if, a bunch of black women started getting involved and they weren't getting the same praise or accolades that the black men were getting, because you have to, when you're thinking in terms of a social justice war, you're thinking in terms of the progressive stack. So, blacks do, they are at a lower rung, so you can complain about stuff as long as there are white majorities involved with the same thing. But if it's not if that's not happening, then you have to find another way. So like if if the Muslim rapper came out and they were blowing up, then people could use that to say rap is becoming more diverse, or whatever, trans rapper or whatever. But it's not as effective. But I do, to your point, because that was what I was considering, I remember this stuff going out with Nicki Minaj, and I remember the stuff going on with, and then there's also the kind of music that gets made, like some, like what Eminem did when he did his whole like Trump rap thing. And then I think Macklemore made some statements on Twitter about, how great he has it as a white man and stuff. So, I mean, there's definitely some posturing and some virtue signaling that goes on, but it's not enough to ruin the industry as it was,
For sure, yeah. And speaking of Donald Trump, I'm not a Donald Trump supporter, but I'm not like against him. He's he's the president and everything, and we're kind of living in this tumultuous time when it comes to like I have like coworkers like bashing Trump, and like if I even express like a thing like I don't think he's that bad, they will already look at me differently.
Well, that's a no.
Exactly.
I've lost friends over that shit, and I can get into that a little bit later. But yeah, it's right. Like it's extremely polarized, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's very polarized. But what I find hilarious about the whole, when it comes to like black community against Trump, I never understood it. Where it's like, oh, Eminem stood up against Donald Trump, and then Snoop Dogg came out and said, oh, hey man, you're one of us. You're for the people, you're for the culture, as this thing like, you have to be against Trump if you're black, and if you're black and you're a Trump supporter, then you're an Uncle Tom, you're a coon, and
Sure.
all this thing to do with race. And the point I'm trying to make is that it's hilarious because before Trump was even running to be president, rappers, many rappers,
they loved
like
him.
Meek Mill, Snoop Dogg, they all aspire to be Donald Trump, and he's kind of like that figure. He's kind of like that boss,
Yeah,
he's exactly what Rick Ross raps about, just this Don that makes money and is all about like, the biggest whips and stuff, kind of like that Ric Flair personality. It's everything that like the rappers want to aspire to, like this Scarface gangster figure. And then now, because he's president, we got to flip the tables. That's something that always has I'd never really understood, to be honest.
No, I was the same way. I remember when then he was running, and I think there could be a couple reasons for it. One was I remember him announcing, and I don't want to make this all about Trump for the whole time, but it's something you gotta observe, because you are looking at a shift in the culture specifically surrounding this guy, who I just think, and while everybody else is seeing it as, well, not everybody, but I think the loudest voices, which are probably in the minority, see him as an extreme figure, either pro or against. More loudly is the people against. But I think that by and large, most people are relatively indifferent, and they're just like, well, he's just number 45. If he does well, he does well. If he doesn't, he doesn't. It's just like any other president that came before. But I think with social media, it sort of makes everything seem magnified and bigger than it really is. However, to go back to what I observed is, I remember before he was president, like to your point, he was like many other, he was just sort of like a name that you associated with power and wealth. So yes, rappers admired that because that was something that they were chasing. It was like he was, to them, he was sort of endemic of the American dream. I remember interviews with Ice Cube where he would basically say, when they would ask him what he thought about Trump, he would say, oh yeah, he's the man because he has money, he has this, he has this, he has this. And even guys like, guys like Eminem, guys like Snoop, a lot of gangster rappers, a lot of, East Coast guys, they admired that. He was New York, he represented all these things that they represented. So I think it was more like now it's almost like if you're in the entertainment industry and you want to keep your job, or you want to sell an album, or you want to get the support of the people in your group, you have to not only be anti-Trump, but you have to be loudly anti-Trump. You have to proclaim it from the mountaintop so that the other people in the industry see that you're on their side and they give you support. That's what it seems to me. I don't even know that they actually believe what they're saying. I think that they think that this is what, according to their circle or their bubble, this is what the people want to hear, so they're going to say it because it will be good for their jobs. And maybe the people will still like them. And they will ignore everything that happened before, everything they said before. For whatever reason, people will pretend like it didn't happen, like they never supported him, like that was not what, or they'll act like they didn't know that this was the kind of person he was, and now they've changed their mind, or they grew out of it, or whatever. But it really, it all just seems pretty phony to me. Like it's just kind of, I don't know, it's like grandstanding and, just sort of like, so, okay, what's everyone else saying? All right, I agree with that. Fuck this guy, So it just seems really artificial. But I think of the Trump thing as more like a symptom of this larger issue. I mean, it really is. Like, one, with the whole social justice infiltrating our culture, because that's ultimately what's happening. I think that there are people who are just sick of it. And really where it comes from is there is a number of people that are trying to tell other people not just how they should act, but what they should believe and how they should feel about stuff. And these people have a large platform, and they're willing to silence people, get people fired, destroy them online, whatever, to achieve those aims. And I know that sounds... I'm not trying to make it sound like a conspiracy theory, like there's somebody literally planning this shit, but I think that this attitude is being produced in academia. I don't know if you know that that's where that's coming from.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, that people get out of, like, because I went to college just a couple of years ago, and fortunately, I'm an older guy. I'm like, I'm 45, and I went to college back in the mid 90s, and there was a big PC thing going on at the time, but I was just too distracted by the shit I wanted to do to like even care about any of that. But I did know people that were, they were being told that at this young age, like I'm talking early 20s, late teens, that the stuff they were going to do in the real world was extremely important. And so therefore, they had to adopt these beliefs if they were going to change things. And it actually fed into kind of a narcissistic idea, because when you're that young, you think that what you do is really important and what happens to you is really important. So if you're told by your professors the way the world is, and they are also explaining to you like, oh, the reason why, your life is hard, even though it's really not, but people believe that it is when they're that young. The reason why your life is that hard is because of all these systems of oppression, whether it's, capitalism, or the fact that you're black, or the fact that you're female, or the fact that you're not straight, or a combination of those things. And it was comforting for young people at the time because it helped them understand why they were unhappy. But it didn't actually solve any problems, because all it did was it just gave them something to bitch about. And I didn't fall prey to it back then as much. But now that I'm much older and I went back to college, I saw that stuff had not changed. And I actually ended up getting into fights with professors about that stuff. Like in school, telling them, no, that's a lie. This is not true. And you're not helping these kids. You're basically just telling them that they have nothing to, they have no control over their life. You're telling them that because you're black, you're going to have a hard time. Because you're female, you're going to have a hard time. Because you're gay, your life is going to be hell. And I'm not saying that life is going to be great for anyone, but as long as you understand that suffering is universal and it doesn't play favorites per se, then you're going to help people understand that what they're dealing with is a human thing, and that they can actually work hard and overcome it, or at least minimize it and help each other, as long as you're not creating these camps. And I notice that that's where that's coming from. And I think that's sort of like the source of these problems. I don't know what you think about that. I'm sorry if I'm being rambly, but I just had a fucking...
No, yeah, man, you're fine. I went to college a couple years ago as well. And that's kind of also where I started to kind of wake up as well, when when you have pamphlets and stuff handed out where they were just blatantly excluding white males from certain things. And it's like, what are you guys doing? And you have these groups that are, like anti-racist, like we're so against racism, and to fight racism, we need to talk about white privilege, and we need to destruct, whiteness, and using all these vague terms. And it's all just a way to kind of like proselytize and just kind of intimidate like white. Like they're just basically being anti-white, and we hate white people. They're the they're the reason for all our problems and stuff. And before I headed out of college, that's what I started to see in there too. Also with these these social studies courses, when it came to like gender studies, female studies and stuff, just it kind of became like just it was like an obvious indoctrination as well. And that's where I kind of started to wake up as well, where it's like, what's going on, what's happening,
Yeah.
It's definitely permeating there. As to why that happens, many people have different theories. I feel like they want to keep the students there so they can milk the tuition and the student loans out of them, so they create this this safe environment where it's not like the real world. So they want to coddle them every which way, and that's what happens with these groups and stuff.
Well, it helps them sort of validate the existence of those. Like basically, you validate the professors' jobs as long as you continue to perpetuate those problems. So that way, the professors always have something to talk about. So in a way, it's like job security mixed in with the classes, And I mean, they probably genuinely believe that shit too. So I wouldn't call it a nefarious plot. I think they actually believe that's the way the world is.
Right, right. I mean, I would say it's a, you know, a combination of many things like you're mentioning.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, it's pretty crazy, and you're seeing you know, more and more of it happening now, and now it's starting to infiltrate our culture. You know, some
Mm-hmm.
things that, you know, I know you brought me on to talk about. You know, when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to comic, I think the big thing was you know, in 2014, Gamergate. That was a huge thing with the gaming journalists and stuff that
Yep.
just kind of blew over. That was kind of like the where this all hit the mainstream, you know.
Absolutely. Actually, it's funny that you should bring up Gamergate because I was involved with Gamergate pretty much from the beginning.
Hmm.
And I noticed that one of the things that I think that a lot of people fail to acknowledge is the reason I think that Gamergate actually has an enormously profound effect on pretty much the way everyone looks at their media today. Like, at least from when I look at my corner of YouTube where I work, and I see the other people who are my peers and some of them my friends, some people that I follow, they may not be talking about Gamergate anymore. But what came from that is still sort of, it has a ripple effect. So people who had, for example, people like Sargon of Akkad, who I've talked to and I met him at VidCon. I had him on our show a couple times.
Hmm.
He started off just with a really small channel talking about essentially refuting feminist videos for the laughs because they were funny to him. And then Gamergate happened, and it was something he really cared about because he's a gamer, like myself. And so he started to like take that stuff really seriously, and he was making streams and he was like making videos. And then Gamergate pretty much, I wouldn't say it's gone, but I think that it's sort of like affected everyone's consciousness to the point, at least people who are involved, to where they're aware of when that stuff is like happening in gaming, in movies, in whatever. They know what it looks like now, right? When SJWs attack, they know what that looks like. So they're aware of it. And it has changed his content and everybody that he's spoken to and everything he's done ever since. So there are a lot of people who say Gamergate's irrelevant and it's boring and it's lame, but they don't realize, I think, that it has had such a profound cultural effect on our hobbies and the way that we look at it in terms of, you know, when someone is coming in and they're trying to genuinely bring something new or add to it, or when people are coming in and they want to change it to suit their own needs and control people. And that's basically the difference, right? You know what I'm getting at?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you know the difference. You know, it's kind of just, you know, when people say Gamergate, you know, they'll think back to a couple years ago. But now, you know, we're living in the after effects, and you know,
Mm-hmm.
we're still in this cultural war that you definitely see in our movies and our comics and stuff. You know, it's not, you know, it had to do with gaming, but usually gamers, they're also into film, they're also into comics. You know, they're usually involved in this you know, in the culture and the media that, you know, we're all part of.
Mm-hmm.
And so it all comes hand in hand. So it's very important to recognize that as well. So,
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about comics.
sure.
I'll talk a little bit about. Let me first of all, let me tell me about your sort of like, you know, when you were into comics, which ones you liked, you know, that kind of thing. Like, what were you into when you were? Do you still read them? You know, stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm still, I mean, the kind of the new comics, I'm not really that into, to be honest.
Me
But
neither.
I definitely grew up on, you know, Batman was a huge one, like the classics, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
you know, Dark Knight Returns, Batman Year One, all the classics. I read it.
Mm-hmm.
X-Men was a huge thing for me as well, growing up. Everything to do with X-Men, I was just obsessed. You know, out of, you
Yeah.
know, those are kind of like, if on the DC side, it was definitely like Batman, a little bit of Superman.
Are you
I
more of a
great.
Marvel guy or DC guy, or is it sort of a mix?
Yeah. I mean, I never limited myself. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like these two camps where it's like, oh, you know, you have to like one or the other. I like both. You know,
Yeah.
there's so many choices. When it comes to the movies nowadays, definitely the Marvel
Whew.
side, but DC is kind of ball. But
Yeah, they got to step it up. That they definitely got to step it up in the movie side. But
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So
But
and
I definitely grew up with many different comics,
sure.
and you know, that's kind of when I started seeing too. You know, even after the Gamergate thing with, people complaining about, you know, sexuality in comics and stuff. And, you know, oh my God, why are women dressed like this? Or why do women look like this? And that's when you kind of started seeing the rumblings of, you know, this social justice infiltrating the comics.
Yeah.
And we're still dealing with it today. But, you know, so that's kind of how my background.
All right. Do you mind if I ask how old you are?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I'm 25.
Okay. All right. So, so this makes a lot of sense because, I think maybe you weren't. Did you watch like the Bruce Timm animated DC shows, like when he did Batman the Animated Series?
Oh yeah.
And the Justice League and the Superman cartoon and all that. Okay. And were you into Teen Titans when it came out too? The cartoon, the Teen Titans one.
A little bit.
That was a little later, so you might have been like getting a little older, or maybe it just wasn't on because I didn't watch the Teen Titans thing. But that's why I was thinking about, because of our age differences. You see, when I was a kid, the DC comic stuff I only liked because of the medium that I saw. Like if there was an animated show about it or something, that was how I was introduced to its existence. Because it wasn't like you had to go to a comic shop or a newsstand to get a comic book. And the newsstands were more common, but they didn't have a lot of selection. So you would have to go on these like trips to a comic store, and the closest one to me was like miles away, right? So I didn't go there very often. So and in many ways I wasn't even aware about its existence. But based on what I knew, usually it seems to me anyway, that what was available or what was on television as some kind of Saturday morning cartoon or some kind of, you know, afternoon show, if it was based on a comic book, that was actually the stuff that the kids would want to go out and buy. So Bruce Timm's work for DC Comics didn't come out until the early 90s. And so by that time, I was well into my 20s, or in my late teens, early 20s when that was coming out. And that was actually my introduction. Before that, it was the Super Friends, and that stuff seemed really kiddie to me, but I always loved Superman. And actually it's because of Christopher Reeve that I did. I love those movies, and I've always loved Superman. He's actually still my favorite DC character, and I know that there are people who have lots of criticisms, but all day I will say I love him, and it's not because he is the strongest. I just think that he's an interesting character that is challenging to write, but can be very good if you do so correctly. But when Bruce Timm like did his show, I noticed that a lot of kids that were younger than me, that sort of grew up during the Justice League time period, like when they had that show, they were humongous DC fans. And I can understand, because that was the time. When I was a kid, then I was, there was a lot of Spider-Man and like Marvel stuff. So I was more of a Marvel person. I mean, I liked them both, but I bought more Marvel comics because that was what I was exposed to on television, and I liked the stories, and the XMen, I got right into that. So yeah, for me, I'm basically the same way. Like I'm more of a Superman fan than a Batman fan, but I like the Marvel stuff, X-Men, Avengers, Cap, all the cosmic shit, Fantastic Four. Like I loved all that. So that's pretty much my background. I think that our age difference is actually kind of that's what I was thinking about. The age difference probably does explain to some degree the preferences, or at least like what influences people's tastes.
Yeah. I mean, with Superman, like, you probably, as a kid, you were watching Christopher Reeve in the movie theater. With me, I grew up on Batman.
Michael Keaton?
Michael Keaton, the Michael Keaton movies I loved. I was too young to watch in the theater, but when I came out, I loved those movies, and that's kind of why I loved Batman. Also the Bruce Timm animated series, that was also it wasn't even a kid show. Like it had like really like adult themes to it, and to me as a kid, I was watching it and I didn't know, but with these adult themes, only going back, I realized watching it had those adult themes. But that's kind of what brought my love to it. And when it came to X-Men, when I first came from Brazil, I'm originally from Brazil, and I moved to America. I started watching X-Men every Saturday morning, and I just fell in love. Like X-Men, till this day, X-Men is like my huge, like number one, like probably over everything. So I'm from Puerto Rico. I was born here though, but my parents came from there. And that was actually another thing, that I found really interesting. It was one of the reasons I wanted to get you on, because I've noticed that in the circles that I watch and the people that I talk to, I've noticed the people who tend to be
the most vocally sort of like pushing back against this social justice stuff tend to be people from, you know, Latin American countries. It's weird, but it seems to be common. Like they're like, can you not do that? And the funny thing is that when it comes to representation, there isn't a lot of Latin representation in comics or film or whatever. I mean, there's some, but it's not like. But the thing is, I never cared about that. Like it never, like it just didn't matter to me. But I've noticed that, like, if I were to adopt that mindset and start to look at all my media through that lens of where are the Puerto Ricans, or even just where are the Latinos, I would likely be very disappointed and I would have a hard time enjoying anything. But I just didn't, I never ever saw things that way. And this is, I think that there's something about it. I can't quite explain, but it just seems to me that it's a pattern I've noticed with a lot of sort of Latino people, that they don't tend to give a lot of a shit about this sort of identity politics stuff.
I think it might. I mean, this is just a theory. I think it might have to do just that. You know, Latin American countries, it does come from maybe like a more conservative background.
Mm-hmm.
That could be a reason. I could be wrong, but maybe that's why. And it's the same thing too with me. With like me growing up, it's like I was never clamoring for a Brazilian character. I'm sure there's one out there. I'm more related to
Blanca.
Blanca, yeah. Like I got that for many years, right? Street Fighter, by the way, Street Fighter. My whole channel, you know, my avatar, the music of my channel is all based on Street Fighter.
Oh
so
yeah, I'm a humongous Street Fighter fanboy. Huge.
Yeah.
Actually, one of the guys I talked to who works in the industry that can't talk openly. He works for Udon Entertainment. That's the company that makes the Street Fighter comics. So yeah, I talked to him. Actually, I talked to him the other day, but I can't talk about who he is because he'd fucking get in trouble. But yeah, sure. I'm a huge Street Fighter fan.
Right,
huge.
Right. But what I was gonna say is that I think with this, you know, growing up with these characters, you know, when I was a kid, I was never looking at like, you know, maybe the reason I maybe related to XMen is, you know, these characters maybe sometimes, yeah, they felt like outsiders. Superman kind of has that thing too. And every time someone's like, oh, like Superman's so stupid and he's so boring, like I can't relate to him, and it's like, I related to him so much because he's like, you know, he's literally an alien. He's in another world. You know, I was an immigrant. You know, I came from another country to America and, you know, was in a different world. And I kind of related to that, you know, Superman, X-Men, you know, was, you know, just kind of feeling like no one understands me. You know, and that's kind of like just, you know, not huge about it, but and that's kind of, I feel like what we lost with a lot of these mediums and these characters now is that, you know, a lot of these characters, they're supposed to be kind of like blank slates that anyone, no matter your race, whether you're white, black, you know, Latino, Asian, no matter what race you are, you can relate to these characters. You know, you can superimpose your what you feel or how you see them on them no matter what, you know, because they're kind of like everyday heroes. They fit like those classic hero archetypes that anyone can relate to. And now it's like you have these people like, oh, we need to have a black superhero, we need to have a Latino superhero, and they're forgetting about what makes a character a good character. You know, you know, you go back to English class, you know, they teach this about you know, what makes a good protagonist, what makes a good you know, hero. You know, you have to have a hero who you know, goes through challenges, goes through these, you know, things that are happening, and you see that too, and you see pandering. That's what I hate about this thing, with about these things. You see pandering because you'll have like a female black chick who's like has no weaknesses, can do no wrong, can do everything, and you know, everyone loves her because she's black, and oh my god, you know, and that's the shit that annoys me too. It's like, this is what you guys are growing up on. Like, this is bullshit.
Exactly. No, I see that 100%. And it's funny that you should mention that, because this is the thing that I was thinking about. Evildoer in our comments, he just said, why do you need to be like a character to enjoy them? I watched the original Wonder Woman and Bionic Woman, Charlie's Angels, tons of shows starring women characters, and he's a guy, right? And I thought about that too. You know, what I don't get, and I try to explain this to people, and it is for some reason, it just does not get through. I'm like, what is more important? Okay. Is it more important that the character look like you in terms of your race and gender and sexuality and whatever? Or is it more important that that character have a character trait that you can relate to, that is something that transcends those things, like something above those? Like you mentioned Superman the Alien. See, Superman was created by two Jewish men that were thinking of that, you know, when they made it. Now, they were thinking, we're going to have him be a man from another place that's distant. And he comes to this planet and he is raised. And this is the thing that's interesting. Superman's story is about, in many ways, it's about assimilation into a country, right? So he comes here as an alien from Krypton, and he's raised by what is essentially an ideal American couple, and he becomes a part of an American family, like a very, you know, corn-fed Midwestern, likely Christian conservative American family. Like it's very, very straightforward, right?
Yeah.
And despite all of that power, he is that person. Like he is, you know, he loves his parents and he loves his country and so on, but he is assimilated. That's why when and I think they were kind of touching on this when they made the Christopher Reeve movie. I mean, yeah, I think that they were kind of touching on this. When the other Kryptonians in the first movie, because I know that there's been multiple interpretations of Krypton. Multiple. Like even the comics can't get it straight. Bruce Timm's had his version. The movies, like the old ones, had their version, and the new ones had another version of it. They don't know what they want Krypton to be, but from what I can tell, it's supposed to be something that is far and away more advanced than Earth. They have a cold. They have almost like a cold way they do things. Like it's not exactly like the United States. It doesn't have the same kind of family structure, right? It doesn't work the same way. It's almost like a very military-esque type planet or something along those lines. And when he comes here, he doesn't bring that with him. He doesn't change the culture. He is what his parents raised him to be. He is essentially Clark Kent. It's almost like he's more Clark than he is Kal-El. And that actually is a fascinating approach to a character. I think that is that makes him very interesting and appealing to me. And the fact that he happens to be, I mean, could you even say he's white if he's an alien? Like you can't, I don't know what that means, but no, I don't think so. I mean, he's meant to look, I guess he's meant to be Jewish in a way because he was made by two Jews and he has dark hair with a curl. But I mean, that's irrelevant. Like he's an alien, but he just looks white. But people would say, oh, he's just a white guy, right? But that's the beautiful thing is that's not important. Like I think, and I'm gonna give it to you again. What's more important, that the character look like you, or that the character have traits in their concept or in their it's like in the soul of the character that anyone can relate to, you know?
It just, you know, it's obvious, you know, that's what's more important. And that's why those characters, when I was growing up, that's why I could relate to it. You know, I never once was like, I can never ever imagine one instance as a kid thinking like, oh, I'm Latino or Brazilians and look at these white people, like I can't like I can't look at myself as that. No, look, kind of to switch gears a little bit, look at Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
Star Wars, when it came out in the 70s, you know, you had Mark Hamill who played Luke Skywalker. Everyone wanted to be Luke Skywalker, and it transcended across the world. Like, you know, it was a global phenomenon when that movie came out. It was the first blockbuster per se, right?
Right.
And yeah, growing up too, I was a huge Star Wars fan as well. And it's like,
me too.
You have that character who doesn't know what he wants to do with his life. You know, he feels like he's stuck on this planet, and you know, he's never going to amount to anything, and he wants to do something greater than himself. And then you have the next movies where, you know, Empire Strikes Back, he has the revelation that Darth Vader is his father, but before that, he's trying to do good and he's trying to save his friends, and he stumbles and he fails, and he has these failures in front of him. And because of those failures, you can look at him and relate to him. Same thing with Spider-Man, you know, his same thing. It's someone who, no matter what, he's trying to do the right thing. He's trying to do good, but he's always failing. He's always stumbling. People can relate to that. That's why I related to Luke Skywalker. And then you have the modern day Star Wars with Rey. She's one of my, the first. I liked her in the first movie. I thought they were going to try to explain away her, powerful, I can do everything, but of course they didn't. And they made her just perfect. Like I said, they do the same trend. Let's make sure we have a minority character or a female character, and guess what? They're going to have no weaknesses. They're going to be perfect because that's how these characters are. And it's like, how can I don't relate to that? No one can relate to that.
No, it's difficult to do.
Go
ahead, finish your thought.
Rey has no, Rey in the new Star Wars, she has no. Even Daisy Ridley was interviewed recently, and she said, "Oh, Rey has no weaknesses."
Yeah, I remember seeing that interview. She said something like, "Why would you do that?" Or she basically questioned the idea that Rey, and she doesn't know what a Mary Sue is because she was interviewed and asked if Rey is a Mary Sue, and like Daisy Ridley doesn't even know what a Mary Sue is. So it's all Daisy Ridley is so much of a Mary Sue, she doesn't know what a Mary Sue is.
Yeah, but no, she said it's sexist. She's like, oh, it's a woman's name, so that's sexist.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah. She's like, well, why isn't it like Donald Stein or something like that? It's like, no, there is such a thing called a Gary Stew, but the Mary Sue, I think, is. I mean, like if there's a movie with a male character and he's perfect, I don't want to watch that either. And because it's just going to be boring. So it's not really a gender thing. But there is a difference, though. And I think it comes down to why would they do that with Rey? And I think it's not only because they think that this is the best way. Like, if we're going to change Star Wars and we're going to make the main character female, we have to make her perfect because we want people to like her. That's almost counterproductive, but I think that's what the thought process is. They're like, well, we need everybody to know that she's a badass. That's important. And they don't know what badass even means, because it's not enough to just be good at everything, but you have to be compelling in some way. Like, even before I get back on this, as a side example of a badass, John Wick. Have you ever seen the John Wick movie with Keanu Reeves? Oh, yeah. Okay, so John Wick is a complete badass. But the movie is almost not even really about him, because it's like you're watching everyone else react to him, and this world building goes on. Sure, you're not really feeling like you're not too worried about John Wick, because it seems like his reputation precedes him, and wherever he goes, people are going to get their shit pushed in, and he does come across as extremely terrifying. That serves the story. It's clearly not done because there's someone in Hollywood that thinks they need to do this because otherwise men will feel like they're not being represented properly in film. That's not the reason. Like, there aren't men that watch John Wick and say, finally, a character that represents me. Like, nobody feels that. Nobody is like, finally, a guy who does all the shit that I can do. Like, that doesn't happen. That's more of an escape. But in the case of Rey, I think there's a political influence, and not just Rey, but many other examples. There's a political influence to do it because people think it needs to be done as a way of compensating for past slights. But also, I think that there is pressure to do it that way, because to have Rey go through the trials and tribulations on par with, say, Luke Skywalker or even Anakin Skywalker from the prequels would mean putting Rey through difficulty, and that could and will likely be seen as sexist. So she becomes like this Fabergé egg that you can't mess with, because you don't want to be accused of sexism, so you have to make her perfect and flawless. And it actually influences the writing. And that's actually the thing that disappoints me, because that is a problem I've seen where I've been noticing this in lots of properties. So I'm going to make a broad kind of statement.
Yeah.
If you are a person in Hollywood, and you're writing a story, and it's about a minority or a woman or a protected group, a person that comes from a protected class in the eyes of the progressive left, okay? There are certain things that they will never do to that character. And I can predict it every time they do it. And I've been seeing this since, this goes back to maybe before Maleficent, but I can use Maleficent as one example. That was the movie about Sleeping Beauty with Angelina Jolie. When I heard it was coming out, I made some predictions, because by this time I was seeing the pattern. I was like, okay, this is a story about a villain. However, and they can't completely change that, because you can't change it so much that it's obvious. But there are certain things you're going to have to do to make up for it. Before that, Maleficent could simply be seen as an evil witch, period. Just an evil witch fairy, just a terrible person, okay? That's how she was in the original animated Sleeping Beauty, and likely the way that she was in the original fairy tale, which I didn't read, so I can't know that for sure. But I'm guessing, usually when they tell stories with crones and witches that are evil, they're just evil, period, right? It's very simple. It's intended to be simple so that we can have an understanding of good and evil. It's sort of like the way Star Wars was done too, like the Empire was bad, and it was just for dramatic effect, you know?
Right.
When they were doing this Maleficent movie, I made a prediction. My prediction was that since the story is about Maleficent, and we know that she's the villain, but they're going to make the story so that she's the most sympathetic character. Because that's how you compensate for evil females or minorities, whatever. You make them really, really sympathetic to the point where you almost feel like they don't deserve what happens to them. And they're always subject to evil that is more like destructive than they are from a white man or from a straight white man or from basically the group that is acceptable to be evil, which is usually a white guy. So in Maleficent, she was an innocent fairy that didn't do nothing, that's just hanging around the forest, and some white dude comes and breaks her heart and messes her up, and that's why she's evil. So she's not evil for its own sake. It has to be because she was twisted that way. Fast forward to some other examples. When I watched, and yeah, sometimes this can make for a compelling story, don't get me wrong. Sometimes if you add that level of nuance and that sort of gray area, it can make the villains less sort of one-dimensional, and I think that can be good too. But when the pattern appears to be that every time it happens, it's only when the villain is female or black or something, and then all the white guys can just be like cardboard cutouts, then I start to become suspicious as to where this is coming from, because it doesn't seem to me that you're actually trying to do this across the board. It just seems to me that there's a class of people that you can do this with, and there's some that you can't. One other example was, did you ever get, because I know that the last time I saw you talking about this, you hadn't seen it yet. Did you ever get around to seeing Black Panther?
I didn't. I've seen some clips of it. I haven't had the chance to see it yet,
okay.
to be honest. No.
So I saw it, and I've loved the Marvel movies. Let me just get that out of the way. I love them all. Even the worst ones, I think, are pretty decent. I wouldn't, I mean, they're not like, I don't think they deserve Oscars, but I think that for what they do, they are great overall. And I can appreciate the ones that even have like the weakest elements. Like one of the ones I didn't like that much was Thor Ragnarok. I know that a lot of people would disagree with me. Yeah, well, I just thought it was a little bit too much comedy. It was like Guardians of the Galaxy, but as Guardians of the Galaxy is what I call it, because it's like trying to do the Guardians thing, but they just applied it to Thor. And sure. I think that it's because they were struggling with what direction to go in. But I think that the more sort of like Shakespearean style stuff they were doing with the original Thor would have been fine, as long as they just, you know, make the action better. I mean, then that's all you got to do is just tell a good story. But yeah, that was my one complaint. I have some other complaints that I think actually they kind of like run parallel to Black Panther. But sure. Going to Black Panther. So the villain on Black Panther is Killmonger. When I knew that the main villain of Black Panther was Killmonger, despite the fact that Ulysses Claw was also in the movie, and they're both big Black Panther villains, I knew that what they were going to do, before I even saw it, I knew they were going to make Killmonger the most sympathetic character in the film, to the point where people would almost believe that he was right for what he did, and that everyone had it coming, while ignoring all the really terrible shit that he does, like he just kills people for no reason. Because I think Hollywood has a problem with just playing a villain straight if they're a minority, because they don't want to be called racist or sexist or whatever, homophobic, whatever it is, whatever the slur of the day is. And it turned out I was right. Not only did they make Killmonger the most sympathetic, which is one of the reasons why everybody praises him for being so great, but they also made it to the point where there are people who I know, who are personal friends of mine, that actually agreed with his views and the reasons for what he did. Which, of course, if you look at Killmonger's views, he is a social justice warrior. He's like a pro-Black Lives Matter, kill whitey, you know, Gazi Kodo, Aquave, fucking black nationalist guy. Like, he is that way to the point where he is willing to not only try to kill white people everywhere, but even kill his fellow black people to get to that point where he can do that. And that should have been seen as terrible. So, but, you know, they made him out to be as sympathetic as they possibly could. And I think it's because that stuff is that influential. They did it with Luke Cage, too. Predictably, everyone was really sympathetic. And I wanted to like the show, but they were so focused on trying to make it more about the identity politics and the storytelling. I think, personally, that Luke Cage falls short compared to Daredevil, which is a shame because, you know, it should have been as good, but I don't think it could get there.
Sure, yeah. And I didn't see Black Panther, but I definitely, like, I know the whole story. Everyone was talking about it. That's kind of what put me off from seeing it, because I had, like, people around me like, this is the best movie ever. Oh my God. And it's like, sure. It's like, this is like the better than The Dark Knight. And it's like, whatever.
It's good. It's good. But, you know, I don't think it's that great. It's not in the top 5 Marvel movies, which I can, you know, you could like literally use just the Marvel films as a case study on how to do movies well without going down that rabbit hole of social justice, identity politics, progressive stacking shit and tokenism and pandering, to just focusing on principles above, you know, universal principles as a focus of storytelling to get people like involved. And I can make the case for that. Like the stuff that has too much of a bent in that SJW direction. I knew Black Panther was going to be one of them. I think to a degree they did it with Thor. And I think the more they start putting female characters in it, or black characters or whatever, mostly female, I think it seems to have a larger effect, the more down that path they start to go. But there are some films that have universal stuff. Like, I'm sorry you didn't see Black Panther. It's almost like I can't talk about it. But I will ask the chat, and maybe I can... I'll ask the chat this question. If any of you guys have seen Black Panther, tell me, what is the central theme of the Black Panther? And then I'm going to ask you, Arthur, what is the central theme in your opinion? Like, what's the thing that you think sort of defines in one sentence or in one term Captain America, the Winter Soldier?
Well, with that movie, I think maybe trust. You know, that whole movie is based around, you know, Captain America. You know, he's kind of like what DC should have done with Superman. He's kind of like, he's always going to do the right thing no matter what. He's not going to compromise. And then in the movie, there's the big revelation that everything he knew was a lie, and he felt kind of, you know, ostracized. So maybe trust and just
trust
privacy.
is good.
Yeah,
privacy. Trust. The thing I was going to say is what Captain America, the Winter Soldier, I'd say the central theme of that is it's about how much more important freedom is compared to security, because that's ultimately what's happening, right? You have like SHIELD, it's actually Hydra. They're going to do something to essentially make sure that no crimes can happen by killing a number of people who they have been able to calculate would likely commit crimes in the future at some point. But no one knows, and they're basically like, we can like fix all crime in the world by just killing this many people. Like protect, I think he says we can protect the lives of 8 billion people by killing 20 million. And Captain America's completely against that. He says, you know, this is not freedom, this is fear, right? That I think is like the central core point of it. And the thing about it is, it's a really, really, really compelling idea, and it doesn't have anything to do with race or gender or anything like that. This is something that anybody, like if you can ask any Joe off the street, how do you feel about giving up your freedom so that you can feel safer? And everyone will have an opinion on it, and it won't be the same, but everyone can relate to the idea. It's like, it's above everything else, right? And that's something that I think, you know, to your point, trust too, like Civil War is basically the same. It's like more of that. It's like, do you give, you know, should the government have power over the people, or should the people should be able to operate on by themselves? It's the same idea. Black Panther, I don't know what the point of that is. I honestly don't. It doesn't, I can't grasp it, you know? All the other ones I can talk about stuff like Ant-Man is about I think that there's a strong story about a father who's trying to do the best thing for his daughter. It doesn't have to be about shrinking and all that shit. But like you take that out and that's what it is, you know? Spider-Man is about a kid that wants to do, he wants to have impact on the world and isn't, it's like he's struggling with the idea that maybe he needs to move at a pace that is comfortable for him and learn, you know, what his limits are, right? I mean,
when it comes, let me just jump in. So when it comes to Black Panther, even though I didn't see the movie, I did read comics of Black Panther. I know what the story is and stuff, and I actually read about the movie before.
Sure.
Like I know what happens in the movie, right? So you can talk about it. Don't be afraid. Like I'm not one of those like, oh, like spoilers.
No spoilers. Right.
I don't care. To kind of play the other side, I think maybe what Black Panther was trying to go for is kind of like the same thing with like Thor, where it's like maybe like the son is trying to take the mantle of the father and like the king, and you know he doesn't know what to do with it, and you know there's all this pressure.
There is a bit of that, like sins of the father. I would say that could be one because of the way that T'Challa's dad acted and the things that he did created ripples that he has to answer for. In the same way that the Thor, I would say that all three Thor movies have that, where some stuff that Odin did is essentially some stuff that Thor has to clean up, right?
Yeah. That's why you know I love, you know, people always bash the original Thor. I like that the original Thor when it comes to like the father-son dynamic, and Loki doesn't know, you know, he finds out he's adopted and has this resentment and stuff. I kind of saw parallels of that with kind of like with Black Panther, even though I didn't see the movie. I got to see it. I was gonna mention real quick with the Killmonger thing. There are like groups, many people online on social media that they say that they're like totally with like Killmonger and that they agreed with him, including Tariq Nasheed tweets out like how Killmonger, you know, essentially he agrees with, you know, with what Killmonger wanted to do and the pro-black sentiment and wanting to, kill, start over, kind of like the black Adolf Hitler, even though he doesn't, even though he's like totally against Hitler, he has like that pro-black sentiment. And there are like so many people, factions of people that agree with Killmonger. So I found that funny, just kind of scrolling through social media on the internet.
Oh, yeah, no, I totally get that about Tariq Nasheed. I mean, he is all about...
Wash your ass! You got to wash your ass!
Oh, my God.
Sorry about that. Ear rapes coming in, guys. RIP headphone users. But,
for a split second, I was like, oh, shit, is my iTunes playing?
No. I have, like, a little soundboard, and sometimes I'll play some stuff off of it.
Nice. Nice.
So I think that that's a pretty good point. The sins of the father thing could have been a really great thing to go with on Black Panther. I just don't. Maybe they didn't like focus on it enough, because it did become a bit. I don't know. It got a little lost, and I think that my issues with Black Panther, and because I want to talk about this a bit, and by extension my issues with Thor Ragnarok, outside of Thor Ragnarok having a little bit too much comedy in it, but one of my other issues with both of those movies is there seems to be like they're trying to include a lot of extra characters, right? So they end up doing so much with more characters that the focus gets lost from the main character that you wanted to see. So what I mean is, I wanted more Thor in Thor Ragnarok. And instead, they gave me a lot of Valkyrie and Korg and the little scissor hand bug guy and even the Grandmaster. And yes, I love Jeff Goldblum. He cracked me up. But I almost wanted them to back off of that a little bit and just give me more Thor stuff, you know?
Sure.
Even I would have been okay with more Loki and Thor interaction, because I think that's one of the more interesting dynamics in the whole Thor franchise, like is the Thor and Loki dynamic, and I wanted more of that. I also wanted more Odin. And I think that they just kind of like, Odin almost had a cameo appearance. It was so short. And the stuff with Executioner, I think, was a bit of a missed opportunity. He became, again, kind of a joke. I wanted more, like, more stuff that was more epic from the comics, more Walt Simonson Thor stuff. And it almost felt like the people doing it didn't read Thor comics much. And Valkyrie is, I mean, if they didn't tell us her name was Valkyrie, I would not know that was Valkyrie. I would have thought that was just like Black Bounty Hunter chick in space. Like there's no, seriously, there's nothing about her that says this is the Valkyrie character. And she's kind of like, she's a little bit boring. And I think it has to do a bit with the fact that for whatever reason, she was better than Loki was at fighting. She was just like so elite that I didn't fear for her life. I didn't feel any tension. So I wasn't crazy about the Valkyrie character. I think that it was kind of boring. And I think that it was just like, it almost felt like a diversity hire. And I don't want to think that about stuff, but sometimes you see it and you're just like, okay, it's the chick from Dear White People. And she's in this movie playing a Norse, a Norse figure, and it's a little bit strange. Like if there was just a random white dude in Wakanda, people would say that's a bit strange, and I'd be one of them, and I think that'd be justified. But on Asgard,
that's kind of what pisses me off too, because you have Black Panther. It's like in my opinion, it's like, yeah, go for it. This is based on a fictional African country, or it's a fictional African country, or not country, state, or whatever.
It's a country. It's a fictional African country. Yeah.
Fictional African country.
By the way, guys, Wakanda's not real. Just a reminder, it's not a real place. Although there is a Wakanda, Illinois. It's a small town here in Illinois, but it's not a real place. There is, yes.
Oh wow. But yeah, so I'm like, yeah, go for it. Obviously, you're gonna have all Black people. It's based in Africa.
Absolutely.
Right. You don't get that same sentiment with the Thor movies.
No.
Like, they show Asgard. That's even before I watched the original Thor. Like I'm heavy into like mythology, with like actual mythology, with Norse mythology, with like the Norse culture and stuff. And yeah, they should have all Scandinavians.
Why not?
Why not?
Yeah.
And then they had even though I love Idris Elba, he's one of my favorite actors. He's awesome. He played Heimdall, which didn't really fit. And then you had that's what I was thinking too with the Valkyrie chick. It's like, oh, so you're from Norse mythology, but you're Black.
That was the same. Like when I first saw Heimdall was cast, I was like, well, that's strange. Like when I saw who they cast Nick Fury, when they cast Samuel L. Jackson, I kind of like, okay, I wrote it off as in the Ultimates. When they were doing the Ultimates, they made Nick Fury black. Fine. Right. It still was a little bit weird, because this is the thing. When you recast white characters as minority characters, the people doing it believe that they're doing those people a favor. But I don't think it's as favorable as it sounds, because what ends up happening is people will always know in the back of their mind, especially if they know the source material, in the back of their mind, they know that there was a substitution. And so there's something artificial about it, just in spirit, right? And to your point, I thought that Heimdall was a strange choice. I don't mind Idris Elba as an actor. This is not a criticism of him. But I mean, if you wanted to put him in something, I could come up with a billion other roles that would have been great, and he would not have been an awkward fit. But this is a little bit strange, like at least to the point where I got used to it, and I was like, whatever, I guess that's fine. I guess this is what Asgard is now. But again, to your point, if we were watching Black Panther and one of those bald-headed bodyguard bitches was white, or or Chinese or something, it would be strange, and I would find it strange, and people would bitch about it. They would complain. They say that shouldn't happen, and it is a case of it's okay when we do it, but not when white people do it. And I just think that if we're gonna, this is where there is a lack of what I would call universal principles. Like, if you can't apply this across the board, then I don't think you're being fair, and it's pretty dishonest. So,
yeah, they don't care about that. They're openly just like they'll show like a thing of all Black people in a movie, and like this is such a diverse cast, and it's like,
no.
What are you talking about? So you're openly admitting that just diverse means no white people. Yeah, that's what you're openly admitting.
That's basically what it means. Yes, no white people. And that's the funny thing. Like, you know, there's all this criticism in Hollywood about this stuff. But if you look at any other country, the other larger countries that make film, theirs are way less diverse than Hollywood is. And it's probably got to do with the fact that it's they have a racial majority, if not an absolute racial hegemony there. Like, for example, there aren't many kung fu movies with white people in them. There are some, but like if you look at Hong Kong action movies, most of them is going to be like 90% Chinese people. And maybe they'll have like a Japanese guy in there sometimes. And there'll be the occasional, like there's a short list of white people that were good enough to do, like Hong Kong action in the 1980s and 70s. But it's a very short list. And I don't have a problem with that. If you watch Bollywood movies, probably not a lot of white people in there. It's going to be mostly Indians. If you watch Wakaliwood, which are like these new up and coming, I say up and coming, they're really low budget, but they're fucking hilarious. These movies from, what is it? Uganda? They're like Uganda, one of the poorest nations in Africa. They're like making these action movies that are extremely low budget, but they're hilarious. And yeah, there's no white people in those. Japan, same thing. Indonesia, they're starting to like make good movies. I don't know if you've seen The Raid. You ever heard of that?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. So amazing film, right? No white people in it. Korea, they're making lots of movies. Very few white people in it. So it's just. Egregious Charles says they have a ton of white villains. This is true. In the Hong Kong movies, that was a big thing for a while, especially when it was still sort of English occupied. But still, they were more concerned with telling good stories and having good action, and nobody seems to complain about that. But when Hollywood does something that makes sense, and that doesn't really happen as often as it used to, people cry racism. Like if you tell a story about what is that show? Vikings, I think, is actually a popular show, and I don't think there's any black people in it. People complain that there aren't any. Or when you do something about Camelot, Arthurian legend, and I think they just made one, or they're working on some Arthur movie, and there is like a black guy in it or something, and people are complaining about it. It's like, well, yeah, it stands out, So
yeah, I mentioned this in my why diversity is ruining movies video, where they had the last King Arthur movie. Which was King Arthur was Charlie Hunnam. Mm-hmm. In the movie, he literally had like I'm gonna butcher his name, but Digimon Humsum. He's
Jaimon Hansu. He was in the first Guardians movie.
Exactly. Yeah, he was like the sidekick in that movie. Which totally like doesn't make sense. He also had like an Asian sidekick as well who was like good at kung fu. And then I think like a Latino sidekick as well. And it was just like a diversity pie of characters. Which that movie I think just ended up sucking anyway. But it's like when I see that shit, it's like, man, like this is what we've come to. Like we got to just have token races playing just to make everyone happy. Like it
feels so forced, right? Yeah, exactly. It's like it's a
forced,
shame.
Yeah, it's forced diversity.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely, and it's really, really obvious. And I watched the interview with Michael B. Jordan, and he was talking about how representation matters, and how when he was a kid, he just really needed to see his race represented. I'm actually genuinely struggling with this because I don't know too many people that have felt that way. And I live in the west side of Chicago, Humboldt Park area. It's got mostly is Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, and black people here. And so those are the kids I grew up with in school. Those are the people I became friends with. And I don't remember any of them saying, I wish there were more people of my race or my gender, if it was a woman, a girl, in stuff. I mean, they were been happy if there was, but there was never like, oh, I think Batman should be Hispanic. Like nobody said that. That was just, I just like him because of what he stands for. It's like people forget that characters in fiction, they stand for ideas, not races, not people. I think the best, let's put it this way, the best ones stand for ideas. They have a set of characteristics that are universally valued by anyone. Do you like the truth? Do you like justice? Well, then these are the characters that represent those ideas. Do you like them? you know?
Yeah, yeah. The best characters, it doesn't matter what race they are. Like I loved Batman. Like no one related to Batman because like he was a oh, he's a rich white kid. Oh my god! Like no, like, be like you feel bad for him. Like you see like the struggle, and it's like I said, you have that archetypal character that anyone can put themselves into.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you know, I was going to mention before, sometimes the identity politics, maybe sometimes it's done right. For example, look at Magneto from the XMen movies, right?
Sure.
He's one of my favorite villains of all time. And I love him. I especially love the Michael Fassbender version of him in like X-Men First Class, X-Men Days of Future Past,
Sure.
which in my opinion are better than a lot of the Marvel movies. I know that's like a minority opinion, but I love those movies.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just personally because of Michael Fassbender. He's a Jewish Holocaust survivor, and it's all based on getting revenge because he had to go through that, and you know. That's why he's, you know, he wants to preserve the mutant race because humans are going to ultimately go against mutants because they fear them. And he's already experienced that as like a Jewish Holocaust survivor. And he's got the freaking, you know, tattoo of his, you know, Holocaust, the number on him.
Number,
and it's like,
right.
Yeah, the number. And it's like, I love that. It's like, and maybe that's an instance where it's like, maybe that's when it's done right. Like,
But that's because they're weaving it into the story, so it doesn't feel, it's not forced. I mean, they almost couldn't do it another way. So I think relating it to a historical event is a way to ground the character in reality. So now we know, okay, he lived during this time period, which is a real time period that happened, so we can relate to him. And of course, the only way that could work for Magneto is either if he was a Jewish person or if he was a Roma or a Gypsy, because I think they were rounding them up too, right? So either way, but the point is, it fits. It's not like it doesn't feel wrong. It doesn't feel incorrect. You know, like it feels like it fits in. Like yes, they made it work. It's natural. So it's almost like I don't think that they were really going for a forced diversity thing from the beginning. I just think that they thought this would be a good way to tell the story. Like Bryan Singer, I actually think that ended up retconning Magneto from the comics, because I think originally that wasn't the case. Magneto, his name wasn't Eric Lenscher, and he was not a Jew. He was just like a villain that just wanted this for mutants, like in the comics in the 1980s when I was reading them. And that was compelling enough, you know, especially because the way that, and there's another thing, I'm glad you brought up X-Men, because that's another one of those universal ideas that transcends social justice ideology. Is there's a lot of people crying about why diversity is necessary, and the reasons for it are things like white privilege, white supremacy, male privilege, etc., right? Heteronormativity, and so on. These things existed. This idea that prejudice and bigotry are not they are not values that people should hold is an idea that existed way before SJW started infiltrating entertainment to try to force it on people. One of the ways that Stan Lee and Jack Kirby handled it expertly was with the X-Men, because they decided we're going to make, okay, Stan Lee wanted to make a new book. He didn't know how he was going to give these guys powers. He didn't really want to think about it in the same way that he did the Fantastic Four and the Hulk and Spider-Man. So instead he said, you know what, we'll just say they're mutants. We'll just say they're born with it, and then when they get to like adolescence, that's when their powers come to be. So this would explain why we're gonna have this superhero team of teenagers that have superpowers, and we'll call them the X-Men. And it was literally because he couldn't think of anything, right? He was just out of ideas. And but what ended up happening as a consequence of this random idea that he had was the stories became about how mutants were persecuted by people who could not tolerate them or were afraid of them and stuff. And a lot of the times they did it so well that the fear of mutants was not completely unfounded. Like it made sense. You could understand why people might fear them, because they were literally, some of them were, you know, extremely dangerous, either because they didn't have control over their powers, or they might use them for you know, evil deeds or whatever. So this was actually a legitimate feeling they had, that normal people had. So you didn't really see it you didn't see it in terms of black and white. You saw the nuance of it, and they did a really good job of telling the stories. And the great thing is that when Stan Lee told this story, the people who could relate to the X-Men as mutants were not necessarily relating to them because it was speaking to homosexuality, or it was speaking to being black, or it was speaking to being an immigrant from another country, or whatever. It was just like, if you ever felt like you don't fit in, if you ever felt like a misfit for any reason at all, then the X-Men are the people that you relate to, because they are that. They are basically the misfits, right? And it works so well because it speaks at this in a level that transcends all that. So like, you could be a black guy that thinks that you're ostracized for your race, or you feel left out, or you feel like you're the only black guy at your school because maybe you got into some prestigious college and there's a lot of Asians and white people there. And then you could relate to the X-Men because you feel like that. You could be a white kid that's just really nerdy and just kind of, or you could just be someone going through adolescence that just is like, your body's changing and you're got a lot of acne or whatever. You can relate to the X-Men for those reasons. So this is something that they did it so well, not even purposefully. Like, they didn't realize what they had stumbled upon. They did it so well that none of this SJW stuff was necessary. Everyone could see that it worked for them. That's why those books were so popular. It was like lightning in a bottle.
Yeah, it was a happy accident, and everyone couldn't relate to it, because I would say that everyone growing up, sometime at one point at time in their life, did feel like a misfit. Maybe they felt like they didn't fit in. I would say most people out there felt that way at one time in their life, whether it was changing schools, didn't fit in certain classes. I'd say that's applicable to most people out there, and that's why it definitely resonated with them. And that's what makes it great. People can, a lot of people try to say it's for relates to like gay people and homosexuality. You can look at it that way.
Yeah, Bryan Singer said that, I believe. He made it about that in his movies. He was,
sure.
And I mean, that's fine. Like, I get it, because that's what he is. But, I think he missed the larger picture. Like, it didn't have to be about that specifically. That's why there was a scene, was it in X2, where Iceman goes to his parents' place, and they're talking about him being a mutant, and his mom is like, "Have you tried not being a mutant?" And so that's like a whole like commentary on the "Have you tried not being gay" thing. And I mean, like, it was a funny line, and I was like, okay, I get where they're going with that. But I think that he misses like how much. It's almost like he's taking something that is so much bigger and he's making it too small. It's like it's so much bigger than that. And I think a lot of people in the entertainment industry and game designers and the current sort of group of comic book writers, they miss that. They're missing that point, that these ideas that they hold, which are, I think, coming largely from a good place. The reason why people are criticizing them is not because they're against those ideas, but I think it's because they're not handled very well by these people, by these social justice writers and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem with these, with the SJW mentality. It's such a simplistic worldview. It suffers when they make these characters. It hinders the stories because it's all about the race or the gender, and it's so annoying, and it just, most people get turned off by it. That's why Marvel Comics, it seems like that's been heavy push on Marvel Comics, and the sales are slumping. Like, people are
huge.
They're getting turned off on it because they're trying to appeal to this social justice demographic, and it's not working.
And those people don't buy comics. They just complain about comics.
they complain about it. They complain about that's why they had, I think one of the worst cases was when they had like Thor become a woman, or not Thor became a woman, but a woman
Jane
took
Foster.
Thor's place.
Yeah.
And like, I was reading like panels of it, and she was like, we're gonna smash sexism or something, and I'm like, oh my god, no, this is not
right.
It's not what we want to see. Like,
well, that's the thing. Like, when SJWs write stories, they see their characters. They're not people. Their characters are not people. They're just a human host for their ideology, and that human host just spouts their beliefs over and over. And part of the reason why they're so emboldened to do so is because they believe that everything they believe is absolutely irrefutably right, and anyone who opposes that or even criticizes that is not only incorrect, but they're terrible, terrible people. Like, they're racist, sexist, homophobes, whatever. You know, they're just bad people, and so therefore they are the enemy that they have to stand up to. You know, they feel bullied by criticism. They don't believe in meritocracy, and they're okay with trashing anything that people have built, no matter how long it's been around, in order to make that point, because they're so sure that everything they believe is correct. I mean, like, unquestioningly. And it's because they've been told that. It's like they believe that there is every talking point or every argument around anything, whether it's guns, whether it's abortion, women's rights, minorities, the welfare state, whatever. None of these discussions have nuance. None of these discussions have where there is like two positions and there might be a middle ground someplace. And I think that there are some cases where there is a pretty much an absolutely correct answer, and some people just hold the wrong opinions. But I think a lot of the time there should be a discussion to find where that is, and they don't believe that that exists because they think that their position is simply, it's not only righteous, but it's pragmatic. It's like the only correct answer, and they couldn't even fathom that someone could disagree with that. And because of it, I think that influences their work, and it influences the community around them to all like march in lockstep with the same ideas, because they believe and they're convinced that those ideas are correct. I mean, if you criticize a female writer, then everyone's going to call you sexist, even if you're trying to help her do better.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely annoying too. I was going to mention it earlier, where I don't know if you remember when X-Men Apocalypse came out about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
There was a billboard with Apocalypse.
Yep.
And he's holding up Jennifer Lawrence as Mystique.
I want to know how many boxes Oscar Isaac was standing on to to look taller than her, because I know how small he is. I was like, smallest Apocalypse ever. But anyway, I'm just taking jabs. I don't know. That's not who I would have cast. Let's just put it that way. I love Apocalypse, but that's not who I would have cast. But go ahead.
I think they did. Like I said, I like those movies more than most people. That is one thing where it's like, maybe they could have gotten, someone who's bigger, but they wanted to go with a better actor. And
sure,
what's whatever. Yeah, it's.
I mean, Apocalypse doesn't. He doesn't do what that Apocalypse, like, he didn't match he looked kind of like him. I know that people made, what was it, Ivan Ooze jokes, like from the Power Rangers or whatever, but I was just kind of like, well, he doesn't really look like Apocalypse, and he certainly doesn't have, and I mean, maybe I'm a stickler for this stuff, but he just doesn't do what Apocalypse does. Like, I know Apocalypse's powers were, because I read the books when he first came out, and that's nothing like that. He's like some completely different guy that does sand shit. And I'm just like, okay, whatever. I'm just gonna turn off that part of the brain that knows how inaccurate this is and just enjoy the movie for what it is. And I thought it was all right. But go ahead.
Yeah, they did build originally, like the people who built that costume. You can find it online, where they made him look literally just how he looked in the comics and in the X-Men TV show. But I think Bryan Singer was like, no, like, we got to do our own thing, and they wanted to put like Egyptian influence on it, so that's why he has like those hieroglyphs.
I'm okay with that. I think that the Egyptian, they could have like I would have been okay if they took like the original costume and then added some Egyptian influence to it. I think that would have been great. I mean, I'd have been totally cool with that. That would have been fine. Yeah.
Sure. But not even about the movie. Like 2 years ago, they had like this billboard that, when they were advertising the movie when it was coming out, and it was like the image of him like holding Jennifer Lawrence and like choking her.
Yeah.
And feminists were online, like they actually got 20th Century Fox to take the billboard down because they were like, oh, this is such a sexist
violence against women.
Yeah, violence against women. This is showing a man choking a woman. And it's like, okay, so you guys want female superheroes, right? You want them to be you know, which they make, that's one of my criticisms of those movies, is they make her way too prominent in those movies. And it's obvious just because she's Jennifer Lawrence and she's a, you know, megastar, right?
She's the it girl right now. Yeah.
Yeah, she's the it girl, right? So they put her in the forefront of those movies, which is like, whatever. But they're kind of, I think it's also a reason too. So it's like, oh, we this is a way for us to also have like a prominent female character and a strong female superhero. Here we go. So you want them to do that, but you don't want them to be like shown to be like having anything done against them, like you know. If she's fighting against someone, it's like, oh no, we can't show that because it's going to be violence against women, and it's gonna trigger, you know, dudes with wife beaters out there to like hit women.
Yeah,
it's like,
right.
Yeah, hey, that's their mentality.
Hey, girl, I just watched X-Men Apocalypse. Bring your ass over here. I'm gonna slap you around for a little while. I'm gonna feel like Apocalypse because that's who I relate to. I was like,
yeah, it's like some dude's driving in his car, he sees that billboard, and he's like, I'm gonna go beat my wife tonight because I saw that. You know, that's literally how they make it out to be.
I know, it's crazy. It's you know what, people who do that, that's how they think. It's like it's totally projection. So if they saw a movie poster for fucking Atomic Blonde and it was Charlize Theron kicking some guy's teeth in, they would probably think, I want to go home and do that to my husband. It's a projection. Obviously, nobody will do that, but I think there's a part of the brain that says, if the roles were reversed, I would feel this way. So therefore, people who in this particular situation want to do this shit to me. And it's like, no, movies are not real. Like, you're supposed to just escape into them. How can we possibly enjoy anything if everything is about power structures and, you know, all this gobbledygook that doesn't serve to entertain anyone? I think this is the thing. Hollywood is doing pretty badly. Like, very few people go to the theater compared to the way they used to. They're struggling to keep up. The internet and like YouTube and the stuff that we're doing right now is actually attracting a lot more larger audiences, especially of young people, than television and mainstream media does. And I think that they're having a hard time adapting to this, and all of this pandering and this sort of social justice-y push within their own little bubble, which makes it worse because they don't know what the public wants. They just know what their peers are saying. That's going to cause them a lot of challenges in the future if they don't adapt.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the internet, we're going to look back at this time in, textbooks, or, maybe we won't have textbooks in the future. We're going to be on tablets or whatever. But, we're going to look back at these times as, we're in an internet revolution where everything's changing. Kids, they're not growing up watching TV shows anymore, or, things on TV. They're growing up on YouTube. They rather have like a famous YouTuber or a Twitch streamer that they like to watch because it's more personal, and it's just, they're consuming media differently. And the mainstream media is definitely, they're scrambling, they don't know what to do. And it's definitely a dying medium. Like, all of these things it's dying, that's why, I think it was, the Wall Street Journal. I don't know what was the big publication that attacked PewDiePie. Was it Wall Street Journal?
Wall Street Journal. No, I think it was Wall Street Journal, I think.
Yeah,
but I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Right, yeah. When the whole thing where, this is they made that hit piece against him, and it was all because of jealousy, because this one guy is the most subscribed person on YouTube. He has the eye of the youth, and he's out there, making the content, and he's the symbol of, or because he's the most subscribed person on YouTube. That's what the kids are watching. Like, people, I talk to my little, nieces and nephews. They're wanting to buy T-shirts of YouTubers that they watch. My niece, she's growing up watching DIYers and beauty gurus on YouTube, and that's what she's influenced by. And then my nephew, he's influenced by gamers,
like Twitch streamers and shit. Yeah.
Yeah, Twitch streamers. He wants, he's asking me for money so he can buy the T-shirt of them. So they're obviously, that's where their focus is, and they're going to be growing up on that. And it's just a new way of people are consuming it. And that's why these huge publications with tons of employees and overhead, they're trying to attack that. They tried to attack it, and they probably still will try to attack it, but that's not how it's going to get it. That's, it's just change. Everything's changed. Look at everything that's happening around us. Like, everything that's constantly changing, fluid,
Absolutely. It is. And they're having a hard time keeping up. So we've been going for about an hour and a half. I am really enjoying this conversation, by the way. Thank you a lot. I wish we could talk more, because I could just get into all kinds of other shit. But
absolutely,
I think we're going to go ahead and call it. But before we do, just to prove that we're not racist or sexist, I'm going to ask you about who is your favorite, a favorite example of a woman and a black character, a female character and a black character that you think was done well without all the agenda pushing, that you think is a well done character in a film or TV show.
Sure. Now that you're putting me on the spot,
I know. I could go first so you can think about it.
Yeah. Go first.
I'll go first. All right. Black character. Yeah. I always say this because I think it's such a good example. Is Blade. It's a really good example. Is Blade, because if you watch the first Blade movie, but aside from the fact that Wesley Snipes has some mannerisms that are typically associated with black culture, there is nothing that happens in the movie that directly addresses the fact that he is black, ever. So you could replace the character with a white guy and not change any of the lines, and it wouldn't change the movie at all. It would not. And I think that that's like a really, really good example of doing a film well without, pandering to anybody. And like, the thing is, Blade was hugely popular. I mean, it's a hugely, nobody dislikes Blade. Nope, and they better not, because it's almost a perfect movie. Almost. Okay? Blade is a really, really, really good example of a black character done right. Because, again, the race thing never comes up. Never. I mean, there is a point where Frost, the villain of the story, mentions Uncle Tom Routine. But it's not relating to Blade because he's black. It's related to Blade because he is part vampire. And so it's a play on words, but it's got nothing to do with him being black. It's about him being a half vampire daywalker. And so that is so well done. I can't believe David Goyer wrote it, because he writes a lot of crap. But that was good. Like, the first Blade was excellent. As far as the female goes, I can't name the characters, but there's an actress. She was my favorite martial arts actress from the 1980s. Her name was Yukari Oshima. If you don't know who she is, you should totally look her up. She's been in tons of kung fu movies, and she is the shit. And the reason why is because first of all, she often plays villains. Often. Because she has this ice-cold stare that she does really good. But she also keeps up with people like Jackie Chan and Sammo Hung and Yuen Biao and all these other martial arts guys that do their own stunts, that come from Peking Opera House, and, they get the shit kicked out of them for a living and put themselves through all kinds of pain. She did that with them. She was able to do that and keep up with the guys, working as hard as she could. And I've seen her in interviews where she talks about the work that she does, and she never complained, never said that they need to take it easy on her because she's a woman, never brought that up. She would just say, yes, I would do this, and I would walk away with, broken bones and bruises, but I loved it so much. I wanted to be better. She was competing, with everybody she basically, when other people did their job really well, it only served to inspire her to try to do even better and work harder. And I find that so admirable. And I don't think that's a male trait per se. I think that women can do it, and she is a living example. Maybe she's an exception. But I really like Yukari Oshima. So I'm going to write that in the chat for you guys so you can look her up yourself. There's compilation videos on YouTube. She is a badass. So those are my two picks, just off the top of my head, which are probably the top picks.
Is she so you're saying the actress or is she a character?
No, she's an actress that's played multiple characters. Gotcha. Her name is Yukari Oshima. Because it's naming a character from a kung fu movie is almost, normally it's funny because when you watch American Hollywood movies, right? if I said name a character you like, some people would probably be able to name one like, you know, a character from a film, you know, maybe Katniss Everdeen or something. But for whatever reason, some actors, they transcend just simple characters. Like if I said name a favorite character, no one's going to just name a character that Arnold Schwarzenegger played once. They're just going to say Arnold Schwarzenegger because he plays himself in every movie. So, or Bruce Willis or whatever. But especially when it comes to martial arts films, it's almost like when it comes to Hong Kong movies, they don't cast for characters, they cast for actors, because there's a short list of really good martial arts actors. So nobody just says, I like, you know, what's the Wong Fei Hong, right? Who is like this like almost legendary Chinese character, hero, right? But he's been played by multiple people. Jackie Chan's played him, Jet Li has played him, other people have played him. So it actually seems to make more sense that when people think about Hong Kong movies, they usually just name the actor because they like their work. And again, they bring so much to the table. It's almost like you watch Jackie Chan for no matter who he's playing. You just want to see Jackie Chan do Jackie Chan stuff, you know?
For sure. For sure. Yeah, I mean, if we're gonna say actors, like one of my favorite actors of all time, a black actor, Denzel Washington.
Mm-hmm.
He, you know, one of my, you know, favorite actors. He can play, I feel like, any role. You know, probably my favorite movie of his is, you know, Training Day. Where
I was gonna say Training Day. That's it right there. Yeah, that was a really good movie.
He plays like the evil cop, you know, thing. And if you actually, I'm a huge fan of his. Just as a person, like when he's interviewed and, you know, he's in kind of like the Hollywood, you know, he's obviously an actor in Hollywood, but, you know, he's hanging around those circles and, you know, those liberal circles, and they'll ask him about like being black or being like a minority and stuff. And he'll always like push it to the side. Like I think he had like a graduation speech too, that was like super motivating where he's like,
yeah, I remember that. Yep.
Yeah. And you can do anything you want. Like you can be anything you want to be. And that's what I feel like, you know, I try to talk about on my channel constantly, is a lot of these progressives and social justice warriors talking about white privilege. I follow also, not to get off track here too much.
That's all right. Go ahead.
I follow these, black business owners who are vehemently against the phrase white privilege. Like we do not have privileges. No one has privilege. We can all achieve everything you want. And they, you know, he's someone who he espouses the opinion of like, we can't be looking at things through the lens of a privilege or like a starting, like, oh, like white people have it so much better than us, because all that does is that discourages the black youth from wanting to do something, from wanting to go out and do something, because, oh, it's like, oh, I'm fucked. You know, I'm not white and I can't achieve something because, you know, I'm starting at this, you know, starting point that no one else is because I'm black. And, you know,
Sure.
And he's someone who says like we need to stop this. Like we can't look at things this way.
Yeah.
And he talks about that a lot. He talks about hard work. And,
Morgan Freeman does too.
yeah, Morgan Freeman. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the fucking progressives hate when people bring him up. He, you know, he's an elderly black man who he talks about. Hey, we need to end racism, so let's stop talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And all the SJWs are like, what? Like, you know, Coon, Uncle Tom. You know, the typical things they throw at him, right? So Denzel, like, he's just, you know, he's someone who just achieved, you know, success through just hard work. And you know, something that I was inspired by him is, you know, he still goes to acting classes because, you know, someone might say to him, like, why do you go to acting class? And he'll say, he said, because even though I might go to an acting class and I'm an Oscar winning actor, you know, I'll go to an acting class. 99%, I know what they're telling me. I already know this stuff, but if I can pick up on 1% that I don't know, that's going to make me better. And that's why I still go to acting classes. And that just resonated with me so much. And it's just a guy who refuses to let, I just love when people, you know, I kind of put that on myself. Like, don't be put in a box. You know, a lot of this ideologies and, you know, SJWism is trying to put people in a box and trying to trap you. And it's like, you are the story you tell yourself. You know, that's Confucius says that a lot. He's, you know, you are the story you tell yourself. Will Smith also says that. he quotes Confucius a lot and says, you know, he who says he can and he who says he can't are both usually right. You know, so that's what, you know, things like that really resonate with me. So Denzel is probably my favorite black actor. Whatever character he plays, I want to watch it because he just kills it out of the park. I'm heavy into gangster movies as well. I loved him in American Gangster. So that's kind of, you know, some of my favorite genre of movies is, you know, gangster movies. I got a huge Scarface mural in my living room, like huge.
I like Goodfellas is my favorite gangster movie.
Goodfellas, yes.
Yeah.
Right. And as far as female,
get your shine box.
What's that?
I said, get your shine box.
Get your shine box. Yeah. Goodfellas is one of those movies that I can like I rewatch it all the time, and every time I watch it, like I pick up on something new because that movie is so full of like different things. It's a masterpiece.
Absolutely.
And so yeah, for female character, I'd have to go with the OG Ripley in the Alien movies. You know, she was the first. You know, she's the example. Every time I'm talking to someone, they're like, "Oh, we need strong female characters and female representation." And it's like, wait, hold on a second. I grew up watching, you know, Ripley, who was like this. You know, she had to, you know, you see her progression from the first, you know, Alien movie, kind of just being along with the crew and having to survive, and then in the second movie, Aliens, where she's like the only one who knows what happened, and she's having to kind of, you know, check the other Marines on there, like, hey, I don't have your experience, but I know what the fuck we're gonna go against.
Yes.
And she just happened, and what I loved about it is she just happened to be a female. Like, it wasn't playing up this, like, you know.
No, that never happened. It wasn't like there was a scene, and they did this in Alien 4, I think, where, you know, all the guy soldiers are playing basketball and Ripley walks in and just like dunks on everybody and just like, yeah, vagina. Like, that doesn't happen in the Aliens movie. She is not them, but she has experience with the alien, so she uses her wits and like this survival instinct to get out of there. But it's not like she was just better than everybody. It was actually a hard fought thing, and they did it so well because there was so much tension. And I have to give it to I'm forgetting James Cameron, who directed Aliens, because he also did the same thing with Sarah Connor in the Terminator movies. Like, he handled it so well that you never got the feeling, oh, you know, Sarah Connor's just a badass. Like, it was like, no, I mean, she's clearly just trying to prepare for this inevitable war, and she's doing the best she can. But ultimately, it's a human thing, and it works very well. It could have been a dude, and it would have been just fine, you know?
Yeah, so, she has parallels with Sarah Connor because, in Sarah Connor in the first Terminator, she's, you know, just a normal, everyday protagonist.
With
just
terrible haircut.
Oh my god, terrible.
It was 80s so 80s. Yeah, her 80s blowout was just so obvious. But when she comes back in Terminator 2, it's like a completely different woman, but not in an unbelievable way. Like, you know, you could see how that happened. You know?
Yeah, you see the progression because in the first in the first Terminator movie, she has to survive this crazy thing, and she learns about her future and her destiny. You know, she thought she was just a nobody.
Yeah. Kyle Reese actually mans her up in the first movie because she's so like out of her depth into what's going on that Kyle Reese helps her survive, and even the stuff that he does, she finds unorthodox and weird, but then she falls in love with him, and then after he dies to protect her, I think that's the moment. Like, it's actually her interaction with Kyle Reese starts her on the path to the person that she is in Terminator 2. It's actually because of that, which is actually great. It really, really makes a lot of sense, you know?
Yeah. Just thinking about this just makes me miss like all of these movies. Like, I'm waiting for these new things to come, but yeah, it was done so well. And then what I was gonna say in Terminator 2, yeah, she's paranoid and everyone sees her as crazy. She's in a freaking mental asylum, but because she knows what's coming, the parallel is with Ripley. Like, I dealt with this shit. Like, I had to destroy the Terminator. Like, I know what's gonna come, and you know, when shit starts hitting the fan, she knows what to do because she's been preparing this whole time. She's in her freaking cell doing pull-ups on the bed because she knows she's got to be ready, right?
Yeah. Those are really good examples, and there's lots more. Like, you know, but those are some really great examples. So there you go, guys. We're not racist or sexist. We do like we do like some female characters, but I'm gonna go ahead and take us out because usually if these streams go longer than like an hour and a half, people start losing interest. So it's a good idea to cut them off, which is basically my plan. But I want to thank you so much, dude, for coming on. And if I asked you on again to talk about more stuff, because I know maybe we didn't get to, get into as many things as you would have wanted to, or I would have wanted to, or whatever. But I find this interesting conversation. So if I ever asked you to come back on, would you be willing to do so?
Of course, yes. Right. I think these types of discussions are very important. Mm-hmm. And I definitely love to come back and awesome. Talk about another topic, and I definitely enjoyed it, man.
Awesome. So next week I'm going to be having on David Jaffe. I don't know if you know who David Jaffe is, but he's the lead developer on Twisted Metal. Was one of my favorite games on the PlayStation. I've actually had him on Honey Badger Radio a couple of times, but it's been a while. And the last time we talked, we did have a conversation like this about how to write female characters well without making it unnatural. And at the time, I was having, I knew what you needed to do, and I'd seen it, looking at what we were just talking about, Ellen Ripley and Sarah Connor as some good examples, as well as characters like Princess Leia, and I forget her name, but in RoboCop, the sidekick, she wasn't a sidekick, but she was the partner, the female cop in that movie, is another good example because she was in there, she wasn't particularly feminine, and they didn't have a romance, but she was a good friend, and she was a solid character, and I liked that about her. And other ones. We talked about it, and at the time, I couldn't quite grasp what was wrong, but now I'm starting to, get into what Jordan B. Peterson refers to as a female archetype for storytelling, like the female path of the hero and how it's different from the male one and how that's a very old story. And so I want to bring David Jaffe back on to talk about it. So we're going to be doing that probably next week. I'm looking forward to it. And then I'll have you back on sometime after that. But I got other people I want to talk to. There's this guy named Just Some Guy who does comic reviews. And sure. He's pretty cool. So yeah, we got a few things lined up. Anyway, I'm just telling the audience what I have planned. Thank you again.
David Jaffe, yeah, he created the probably my favorite video game series is God of War.
Yep.
I freaking love
those games. He did. He hasn't been on God of War for a while.
Yeah, he did. He just did the first one.
Yeah. I think he only did the first God of War, maybe the first couple. I'm not sure, but definitely, yeah, that's the same guy. He did God of War. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty cool. So I look forward to talking to him. He's very, very genuine person you could just talk to. You should sub to his channel, and so he has a YouTube channel where he does streams, and you can just talk to him in the comment section. He usually responds. So, wow. He's actually a very down-to-earth guy. So we'll go ahead and sign out. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you guys for coming on the stream today. And I'll see you tomorrow when I do the HBR News.